needles. I personally use dong bangs. I use number 1, which is 0.16 by 30. Hello, it's Valeria Nasana. I used to use serines. Primarily I use number 2, which is 0.18 by 40, so longer needle. When I switched to dong bang, which I use the spring 10s, okay, 10 needles per package with 1 guide tube. And the reason I switched from sarin, yes, for me sarin is like the standard, supposedly. Now, if you go to Japan or you're a Toyohari person or whatever, you may have a totally different standard than sarin. Like there's gold needles and silver needles and blah blah needles, and you know, you can get way more expensive than sarin, a lot more expensive than just sarin if you really want to. But you know, I use sarin 0.12 by 15 for the feet. But for the body, I use mostly dong bangs. Okay, I switched from sarin not so much because of price. I switched because of the plastic. Okay, and now this particular size needle by dong bang is really fine. It's almost not. It's not a sarin, but it's almost a sarin. In fact, I actually prefer them. Okay. Now, what you want to do when you evaluate a needle, in my opinion, because I've seen needles that are supposedly the same gauge, and actually we just did a comparison between a dong bang and a sarin, and the dong bang is actually somewhat thicker. Okay, but thickness is not the only thing that counts. Okay, what counts is that the needle is flexible. Okay, you take a Chinese style needle. That's exactly, you know, it's going to be 0.16 by 30, and you can't bend it. Okay, it's like, you know, that kind of needle is going to hurt no matter what the size is. Now, the bigger the gauge, yes, it's going to hurt more. But even a very thin needle, okay, that's tight, and when you're just manipulating, you know, very lightly like this, you know, a tight needle is going to hurt. So for me, the biggest test is how flexible is it, and what I do is I just tap it into myself, and if I feel like a little, you know, just a, you know, like a scratch, that's not, for me, not a good needle. So I have to say that I have not found many. Okay, and dong bang does. The other advantage of there is a needle in America that some people use. A friend of mine uses a MAC. I don't exactly know where she gets it. They felt flimsier to me, but they were fine. But for me, really, for the price and quality at the same time, I personally go with the dong bangs. And you know, it's like I buy $22. I don't know, what do they cost here for a box of 1,000?
Rather cheap, like a penny a needle, pretty much.
A penny?
Yeah, about £30 for 1,000.
30 pounds for 1,000. Okay, so I
just-
do.
just
Okay.
under.
Well, I do
Postage
buy
on-
them for almost half price than you go do, but it's
Oh,
okay.
there's postage on. There's postage on it as well, you know, because everything is mail order, isn't it?
Yeah, but any other needle is going to be
Oh, sure,
with postage.
sure.
So okay,
Yeah.
but
How do you spell that? How do you spell the name of it?
DONG,
Yes?
BANG,
Okay.
and Lauren said you get
Yeah,
it
the
from
cheapest place to get them is with
Acuprime.
Acuprime.
Yeah.
And so the size, what was the size?
0.16
Okay.
by 30.
Okay.
And you want to get the spring 10.
Spring 10.
Okay,
Are they
that's
coated?
okay. Sorry?
Are they coated, silicone coated or not?
I believe these are not. The sarins are. Okay. I think that if your metal is decent enough, if the, like I said, I use it, I really, you know, there's a very slight difference between that and the sarin. I don't think the silicone coating makes a big difference. So if the metal is good, it will, you know, when you have a bigger instrument and you're going deeper, then silicone coating, like for medical instruments, makes sense. You know, but for what I do, the silicone coating does not seem to be a big deal. Doesn't seem to me, you know, the smoothness that the silicone gives it for what I need, at the depth and the thickness of needle that I'm using, as long as the metal itself is smooth and good, I don't think you need it. All right. if you want well, I did give some Moxa. I get my Moxa. Moxa can be very expensive. I can only tell you United States prices. It's you get the super gold Moxa, and they're named different things in Japan. I use a company called Kobayashi in Japan. In the States, if you buy it, will be like $130 for 100 grams. They come in boxes of 100 grams. I suggest getting 100 grams and then just split them amongst different people. You will not need 100 grams it will last you for probably 5 to 10 years easily, 100 grams. And don't use it for other things except direct Moxa, because it's a waste. You can use, if you're using, like Kyotoshin, you need a different kind of, just use a rougher Moxa. You don't need that very fine Moxa. I use a company called Kobayashi, and with the shipping, with everything, it's $80 for 100 grams. Okay, so it is. I would just get together and Fern has their website, but I can email it to people and I can let you know how to get it. So, and I'm sure that shipping to England or shipping to the States is probably the same. I can't imagine that it's going to be that much different. So, that's pretty much it. Shionko, I do make my own Shionko, but ultimately you can. I don't know who else sells it. I know Andy sells it. So, but what I do is I make it once every few years, and then it's a huge batch, and I just give it out to people.
Have you got a recipe?
Yes, there's a recipe on my website.
Okay.
So you will find the recipe on the website. So, all right, Autoimmune. All right.
Can I just ask
Yes.
a question on this one, because I was looking at it. I didn't have this yesterday, so do you mind if I just ask a couple of things
No,
on this?
of course not.
And for Ren 9, it says pressure pain. Do you mean when you press it, when you put pressure on it, there is pain?
Yeah, pressure pain means you press and they go, ooh, not so comfortable.
Okay.
Or they go, ouch. But yeah, uncomfortable.
Okay.
Because with everything is pressure pain. Everything
Yeah.
you press, except with Ren 9, you can have just pressure pain, or you can have pulsing.
Yes, okay.
Okay, so some people, they have a big pulse, but they're not saying ouch.
Okay,
But you can clearly feel the pulse.
okay,
So that's why it's particularly said pressure pain there.
okay,
So-
okay. And then next to Ren 12 and stomach 21, weak pancreas, and in bracket beam.
Okay, so, Ren 12 reflects stomach. Stomach 21 reflects ulcers, duodenal on the right side, stomach ulcer on the left side. If you have a cross and it's puffy, okay,
Oh.
then we call that a weak pancreas.
So that's what you mean a beam, if that's
It's like a beam across.
Okay.
What is the name for stomach 21? Young men, right?
Can't remember.
Thankfully, my Alzheimer's is still not good. It's set too strong. I believe stomach 21 is called Young Men. Young is a beam, the gate to the beam.
Okay.
And the beam is, the pancreas is like a beam, it's like you have, the pancreas is like this, going across, well, actually it's here. So it's like it's like a gate, that's sitting on the large intestine, and there's the, we'll make it look very Japanese, but I can't draw, but these kinds of gates.
Yeah.
So it will look like, so that stomach 21 is the edges of the gate,
Okay.
of the beam. Sorry.
That will help to remember.
I guess so.
Okay. And then twisting syndrome.
Is that related to gallbladder 26?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, where's the person that had shoulder? She was.
Yes.
Okay, she's not here. Okay. So, when you twist, okay, the axis, when you have a problem with twisting, the axis of twisting, say you say I went skiing and I twisted or something,
Okay.
the axis of twisting is gallbladder 26. So often what happens is, a typical situation is you twist, or you had a car accident, you had your seatbelt on, and somebody rear-ended you and you twisted, it's going to be across gallbladder 26. okay? And then you have, say, neck problem or shoulder problem or something. So gallbladder 26, or you can have low back pain. Gallbladder 26 is a place that will reflect the fact that there's been a twist. It's a teeny bit different. It sounds the same, but it's a little bit different than what I call a torque. Okay, so in a torque, rather than me getting on the table, maybe I should have. Okay. A torque is when you go like this. A twist is big, a torque is smaller. Okay, so gallbladder 34 is the meeting point for tendons, right? Okay, it kind of doesn't make sense. Okay, because, I mean, I know you can make it up. The tendons belong to the liver. Liver and gallbladder are good friends. Well, why don't we continue from gallbladder? Let me do the opposite clock. I should get back to the heart. Blah blah blah. I mean, there's, you can always do that. Look, either the tendons belong to the liver or they suddenly belong to the gall. Like you can't say. So why is it that they say that gallbladder 34 is meeting point of tendons? So if you think that every small movement you make, okay, torquing, okay, which is different than twisting, okay, any torque that you make, because all the time, every time we walk, we're torquing, is going to involve the fibula and tibia moving, therefore involves gallbladder 34. Because of that, who is going to absorb the torque and show it? Muscles, if there's a torque, a muscle is flexible enough for a torque, which is a small rotation, to handle it. But tendons can't, they don't stretch as much. Okay? So tendons are the ones that when there's a torque, tendons tend to get torqued. Okay? That's why gallbladder 34 is a good point for, not so much for tendons, but for torque. That's why gallbladder 34 is a great point for sacroiliac ligaments. Okay? Because it's often those ligaments are tight because the sacrum and the iliac bone they're a little bit kind of out of place. So there's a torque on those tendons, on those ligaments.
And could relate to low back pain.
Well, certainly really, if you have sacroiliac ligament pain.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Any more from that page? We're good?
Yes.
All right, so autoimmune.
Just so we've got, I think, an autoimmune patient coming tomorrow at some point. So.
Okay, good. And well, I believe we have one today also. So, autoimmune is seen, okay, there are no clear reflexes for autoimmune. Okay, it's not like I can say, if they have pain on large intestine 15, that signifies autoimmune. And there's a bunch of things out there like that. For example, there is no clear reflex for diabetes. Okay? You can say that diabetic patients, T11, T12, it's almost like the vertebrae has a little extra stuff on it. It's like you took chewing gum and stuck it on the vertebrae, okay? And then you're feeling like on that vertebrae. So you can say autoimmune type has specific findings that indicate that, just like we say small intestine 11 is cardiac on the left side, okay? But there's a few things that they're likely to have, okay? Number one, but other people can have them as well. Number one is they will have puffiness or, around the sacroiliac ligaments. Okay, UB27 area. Okay, it's very common. And some of them, it's like there's a ping pong ball there. You're pressing on the sacroiliac, like, why do you have like a ping pong ball moving around? Or what do you call these things that kids play with? Marble, like a rubber marble in there, okay? So that's fairly typical of autoimmune type. The other thing, quite typical of autoimmune type is pressure pain on the mastoid, okay? Now, this is my experience, is the pressure pain on the mastoid. Recently, Kiiko has been talking about, I don't know where, I haven't found it necessarily, but I haven't searched very strongly for it. There is some claim, apparently by some Japanese people, that Palmer, who's the chiropractor, the father of chiropractic, says that all autoimmune disorders have to do with C1 subluxation. Okay? With all due respect to Mr. Palmer and to Kiiko Matsumoto, Palmer lived in the 1800s. Okay, I don't know how much, if the concept of autoimmune disorders in the 1800s, because autoimmune disorders have existed and we've talked about them, but they haven't come into popularity really until really the 90s. I mean, in the 70s people talked about it. It was kind of like something that, yeah, you knew that it kind of existed, but as a really big subject, it's only in the last 25, 30 years. So I have no idea what Palmer meant by autoimmune. I don't know, and I also don't know what he means by C1 subluxation, but the interesting thing is, according to Kiiko, C1 subluxation, I don't know how she knows that because what is she doing x-rays while she's palpating? I don't know, but I guess some chiropractors are claiming that, or whatever, that it shows on the top of the SCM or the mastoid. Okay, the top of the SCM attaches to the mastoid. Okay, so there's clearly something in the mastoid because we both came to the same conclusion that the mastoid somehow reflects or is common in autoimmune. A third thing, this is not as common, but it can be very helpful. It's not a finding in terms of palpation. Some people it's in the throat and just below, they will have, it's not exactly red, it's almost, it's orangey red. When a person has, and it's not a suntan, okay? When a person has that, there's a very high correlation between that and autoimmune disorders. If you ask this is totally an Aviism. I haven't found it in any text. I can't confirm that in any way. I can just tell you that it's like that. Okay, that's my experience. And I've actually diagnosed someone on the phone, called me about her sister, and they live quite far away. I don't know her sister, I know her. And I said, I think this person I think your sister has an autoimmune disorder. And 2 days later, her sister was actually in a hospital for, all this, kidney problems and stuff. And 2 days later, the doctor said, actually, we now think that the problem is she has lupus, that it's attacking the kidney. So it's not like, wow, I'm better than the doctors, but it's just something to kind of, don't look for it because not everyone is going to have it. But when somebody has it, start thinking, are you autoimmune? It's just a question, just like, is your root cause coming from the lung? Is your root, it's just a question for you, Yeah.
So in the books, Kiiko talks about, Master Pagano said that the cause of autoimmune disease was an over-tight mesentery.
Yeah.
How do you relate to that? What do you make of that? How does that help you? How does it happen? What does it do? Do you know what I mean? It's a bit of a strange statement.
Yes and no. I'll explain that in a second.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll explain that in a second. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if I'll explain to your satisfaction, but I'll explain. You asked me how I interpret it, so I'll tell you. Okay. So let me explain the treatment first, because that will relate to it. Because then when you, sometimes we invent words and explanations because that matches the clinical reality. Okay. So how do we treat and if I didn't get to your question, remind me. Okay. So how do we treat autoimmune disorders? Okay. So first of all, what is an autoimmune disease? Okay. An autoimmune disease, I know this sounds incredibly simplistic, but it's really going to pay off to cut it down to that. An autoimmune disorder is basically a systemic inflammation. Okay. You can then argue a bunch of details, etc. But ultimately, I believe that every autoimmune disorder is going to come down to an inflammation. There is going to be inflammation. It may not be the only thing. Now, it's not the definition of autoimmune disorder. An autoimmune disorder is defined as the immune system is attacking the body. That is the original definition of autoimmune. Okay, whether that's still considered the real definition of autoimmune nowadays, I don't know. Okay, but 30 years ago that was considered the definition of autoimmune. The immune system is hyperactive, not recognizing the body as self and attacking it. What does it mean if it's attacking it? It's producing inflammation. Okay? So, when we have fire point pain, what do? We do water, metal. You know, we phrase it as metal water. Metal water to overcome fire. Okay? So that's if you have inflammation or fire point pain on a particular channel. Okay? Okay? Remember I told you yesterday, if there's one concept you want to take, two concepts you want to take from this class, is one, release the SCM, opposite side Samjiao 8 or Samjiao 5 with rapid pulse, and if there's fire point pain, use the metal and water points. Okay? That's gonna, if nothing else, you can always use that. It's pretty reliable. Okay? Now, if you have systemic fire, you have inflammation, systemic inflammation, that's what autoimmune disease is. You now, it's not like I have fire, you know, pericardium 8 is hurting, heart 8 is hurting, lung 8. The whole body is, there's an inflammation systemically. What is going to be the metal water in the for the system rather than for a meridian? It's going to be the kidney channel, which is water, and it's going to be the lung channel, which is metal. Okay, so we're using metal, water, lung, and kidney for autoimmune. Now, what Nagano said was use REN4 for autoimmune. REN4 is the mu point of the small intestine. So you can look at it many different ways. You can look at it, I'm using metal and water, and then I'm using fire. I'm using the yang of fire. Okay? Now, so now that you have the so-called treatment, now on top of that, what you can say, I actually sometimes will needle into the mastoid upward. The other thing is I can release the mastoid with liver 13, releases the mastoid. And Kiiko likes to figure out which side, because if you have C1, if it's supposed to be C1 subluxation, only one side is the true side. So which side at the top of the SCM, and then she'll use Sanjiao 3 to release the top of the SCM. Okay. So which is the treatment, the Sanjiao 3 treatment, or you can use Yao Tong Shui, so Sanjiao 3 plus the other one that's more on the large intestine side. Yao Tong Shui. You know those points?
No.
Chinese low back point. Yao, Tong, back, pain, Shui, caves. There's points for back pain. It's the extra points are, you know, it's Sanjiao 3, and it's not large intestine 4. You go from large intestine 4 one phalange or whatever those things are called over. What? It's not a phalange? Phalanges on the feet? Oh, okay. Is that a tarsal or a...
It's a tarsal.
Okay, so go one tarsal over. One pharynge over. So, all right, so those 2 points, but Sanjiao 3 is the main one. And you can go really close to the bone on Sanjiao 3. Okay, so that's what we use if somebody has at the top of the SCM pain.
Close to
which we
bone?
call it,
Sorry, close to which bone of the side?
upwards.
Upwards.
You know, I mean, to where the tarsals meet. To the junction of, yeah, you can go as close as you can to the junction of the tarsals. Okay? You know, there's a V there, right? So, now this mu point of the small intestine, that's what you're talking about. Like what Nagano said for cardiac disorder, okay. REN4, I'm telling you just historically how I learned it. Okay, I first learned REN4 not for autoimmune but for cardiac. Now it doesn't mean that that's how Nagano did it, but you know. So Nagano said that you have to break when you needle REN4, which we needle for cardiac also. Remember, not for slow pulse though. What you need to do is you need to touch the mesentery. You kind of need to touch the mesentery of the small intestine. Okay, and you have to break it down. Well, I don't know if I'm touching, I'm not touching, I just needle and, you know, see what the results are. Now, so then you get a whole bunch of theories. So my own so one way to look at it is, this is basically systemic metal water plus the yang of fire. So, you know, you're trying to subdue the yang of fire. Okay? So breaking down the mesentery tissue would be maybe an equivalent of reducing. Now, take this treatment for slow pulse, translate it to the back. You translate it into UB27, which is where they have those gummies. That's the equivalent of REN4. Now, what's the equivalent of kidney on the back? Would be either UB23 or UB52, right? What would be the equivalent of lungs on the back? It will be UB13 or UB42, okay? So on the back, that's going to be your treatment. On the front, your treatment is going to be kidney, say kidney 7 or kidney 9. The original phrase was use kidney 6 or kidney 7 plus either kidney 9 or kidney 10. So we were actually using 2 kidney points. Okay. Of course, the ideology now would be if there's kidney 2 pain, use kidney 7 and 10. If there's no pain on kidney 2, you can choose, and you can choose, I usually just choose 1. I don't choose 2 kidney points. You know, you could use kidney 6 and 9, supposedly, in autoimmune, but, or kidney 6 and 10, or, you know, something like that. I generally don't. I use 1. But if there's kidney 2 pain, I will use kidney 7 and 10. On the lungs, we say use either lung 5 or use lung 9. That was the original. Or, not and, or. Either 5 or 9. I have to tell you that I mostly use 5 or 8, not 9. I don't use 9 very often. Okay? So that's the treatment. From here we can start speculating onto like what is this thing about REN4. Now if REN4, by the way, some cases of autoimmune you can't needle. Number 1, slow pulse, don't needle REN4. Number 2, if they have Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, do not needle REN4. Why? Because the inflammation could be very close to REN4. So it's not, you don't want to needle into the inflammation. Okay, so use Mushu instead of REN4. Okay, so that's the protocol for autoimmune. So this business about the mesentery or the twisting issue of the small intestine is this. There are theories by which autoimmune disorders start from the small intestine, because what happens is if there's a permeability in the small intestine, there's molecules that leak out of the small intestine into the bloodstream that are not supposed to. They're, you know, but because of the permeability, the tissue is not holding well enough things inside. I mean, you have to understand that in the gut, you have one cell around the small intestine and around the large intestine. It's basically one cell's width between what is considered you, which in this case is the outside of the intestine, and what's inside the intestine, which is what you ate. It's the outside world. Okay? In other words, all the bacteria, all the whatever you're interacting with, which is what the immune system is meant to work with or against, is you have the small intestine here and you have your lymph nodes around to make sure that nothing permeates into you. Okay? So that's why most of your immune system is around the small intestine. If the small intestine, if you have a permeability problem, and molecules, food molecules that should not have been going out, you know, to go to the liver or whatever, are now leaking out instead of keep going into the large intestine and being pushed out. Okay, now your immune system is going to say, hey, we don't like this molecule, or we don't, whatever it is there, I don't know what it is there, and it's going to create a reaction. Okay, and that's one of the theories of autoimmune is that this is how autoimmune diseases start.
So this is leaky gut.
Yeah. Yeah, the permeability of the gut. So
Which way is the gut leaking? It's absorbing too much
it's
stuff?
well, it's not exactly, it's leaking from the small intestine out towards the body, and it wasn't supposed to. The permeability of the
So it's leaking into the body.
Into the body, yes. Out of the small intestine
Bad
into the
stuff's
body.
getting into the body.
Yes,
where
exactly.
it should be.
It should be contained in the small intestine. And or in some cases, it may not be bad stuff, but it may be stuff that hasn't been fully digested yet. The enzymes haven't worked. Because if the wall is too permeable, the stuff that comes out, the stuff is supposed to come out of the small intestine. Okay? But there is a certain transit time that, things are supposed to be worked out. So, stuff comes out too early, or, I'm not I don't do visitations into the small intestine and figure out, oh, yeah, you're supposed to be here, and but that's my understanding of the theory. Okay, so.
Sorry, what is this mesentery? Did you say mesentery tissue? What is the characteristic?
The mesentery tissue is the
Mesentery tissue.
wrapping tissue around the organ. Every organ has some sort of connective tissue that basically holds the shape of
So
the
why
organ.
would you need to break into that then?
That's what Nagano said. I told you I'm not trying to break it.
Okay, all right.
That's his understanding. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if you say that autoimmune disorder is a systemic fire, basically it's total chaos in the body, which we can agree that that's ultimately what it is. Okay, so Ren 4 is, well, at least it's part of the Dantian, okay, which is kind of the center. The center is supposed to be the place of, the core is supposed to be absolutely calm, and yet somehow control everything around it. Now, look at it, let me see if I can draw it. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get the concept across. So, you start as, say, you start as a single cell situation, okay? And basically there's an exchange across the cell, whatever this thing is called, the membrane that protects the cell. Okay, so there's exchange between the outside and the inside. It gets oxygen in, it gets, whatever, nutrients it does from its environment, Then this cell becomes, it becomes some sort of simple organism, and that simple organism now, it's large enough that it basically gets food from the outside through, let's call this the mouth. And it's passed, there's a tube, there's some sort of tube here where whatever came from the outside gets digested. It goes into the other cells, and then whatever gets excreted out of here. Okay, and this can, whatever is around this tube, so this tube basically is a way of getting food in, getting waste out. Now we have more than one tube for us, because we have one tube for oxygen and one tube for food. Okay, or not tube, whatever situation. Now, if this is okay if there's only so many cells here. So this organism, is relatively small. At some point, this organism becomes too large for things, because if there's a cell out here, how is this cell going to get the stuff from the tube? This tube holds all the nutrients. Okay, so as long as you're close enough to the tube, no problem. At some point, the organism has developed. We're talking about evolution, right? Not little by little, but also embryologically, it's going to happen that way. As this gets bigger, you need a transportation system that's going to move, the nutrients, and that's how you start developing blood vessels. That's the purpose of the blood, right? This is going to be fine up to a certain point. So in other words, if this is going to be a small enough organism, a non-complex enough organism, you have your tube, you have some sort of blood that's just soaking around and just somehow floating out there, and the blood sloshes around and it gets into the tube, and everything's cool. At some point you're going to need vessels, and if you have vessels you're going to need a pump. So suddenly you need a heart. Okay? So in other words, the bigger we are, the more complex we are, there's going to be a development from just mouth to anus to needing blood, to needing vessels, to the blood vessels are going to coagulate and create a pump in order to do that. Okay? So once that happens, instead of you being a straight tube, from top to bottom, now you need a more complex tube because you're serving a much larger body. This tube now starts doing this in order to get more length for itself. It needs more space without making the organism much bigger. Okay, so I know this sounds like, advocation of, what is it called, directed design or something. So it's not, it's just evolution. So I guess they were, other things formed with very large tubes also, but they didn't survive or something like that. So,
Well, presumably that was the dinosaurs.
sorry?
Presumably that was the dinosaurs. I mean, instead of having a coiled tube, they had a,
Oh, really?
they had
I
a
don't-
huge body.
Maybe.
I'm just guessing. I don't know.
I have no clue. I don't know. That would be an interesting thing to find out. So now your small intestine is wrapping around. The first place where there is a twist in the body, where there is a coiling in the body, is basically therefore in small intestine in Ren 4 is the idea, and that place, since it's the place of coiling, that center should be calm. So I think that might relate to some extent to that phrase. You want to break down the mesentery of the twist of the small intestine. You want to calm it down. Okay, but quite honestly, if I'm just looking at it, what I'm saying is it's a metal water treatment, and you're adding fire. That's kind of that's a much simpler way for me to look at it, because I'm not sure what Nagano exactly saw and what that phrase was meant to suggest. But whatever it was meant to suggest, it clearly that it advocated towards the, it was meant to suggest the treatment. Does that make sense? Not necessarily.
It was just the way, he's saying that autoimmune is because your mesentery is too tight. Makes me feel that I should be doing some sort of qigong to loosen up my, or the patient suggesting some sort of exercises to get them their organs moving more freely in the.
Well, that's always true.
The space, because
Yeah.
everything else is massaged. If it's just that's the answer, that it's just everything's too tight and fluids aren't circulating, then they should be doing the twist. They should be doing dance or something.
They probably should. At least they'll enjoy it.
You don't have to come to acupuncture. They'll send you to the dance studio or something.
Yeah. Well, maybe you can have a reciprocal relationship with the dance studio. And but okay. Do you know what nollies are?
Nollies.
Nauli, Nauli. Okay. So this is. It's like belly dancing. It's worse than doing this.
Hang on, Avi, just let me zoom into that.
See, it's moving your intestines around. Yes, this is one of the best things you should be doing but most people can't do them because it takes years. You know what most people are going to do? They're going to do this. They're going to hula hoop because they can't move the ribs and the intestine. It takes a long time to be able to connect, to do that. So the only other thing, the alternative for that is some sort of pranayama. Okay?
I'm so sorry.
Pranayama. Okay, which means you go like this and hold the breath. So you're getting a little bit of the same action, and you're creating a more elastic situation. But you're right that I think that most diseases come from lack of elasticity. It's totally what the Chinese say. What do the Chinese say? Disease comes because of blockage. Okay? In plastics theory, no, I regret having done that. You have, a plastic is opaque or it's clear. Okay, I mean, it's not one or the other. It has many levels. If you have molecules, and the more the molecules are aligned, the less opaque the plastic is, the clearer it's going to be, until you get to a crystal that basically can create a laser. So energetically, you can tell because of crystal, energetically things just go through. The more the molecules are just globbing on each other, the more opaque the plastic is, or the substance is, okay? It's the same thing with connective tissue. If it's all aligned, there's gonna be a flow. If the connective tissue is all globbed on top of each other, you're finding these gummies, okay? Then there's no conductivity in the body. It's the same thing. That's why you can cure people by stretching. You just have to know what to stretch. It's not so easy, you know. I mean, that's why with acupuncture, in some ways, it's easier because you just go into the glob and you break it down. And because connective tissue, that's why Nagano said acupuncture is connective tissue modality. Acupuncture deals with the connective tissue. It affects the connective tissue. So you're taking the stuff that's surrounding and you're taking the globs and you're breaking them down, and because it's everywhere, it's going to transmit signals everywhere, just that breaking down. So
Is the relation of REM4, if this is not diversion, to cardiac, then?
I'm not, that's, I think, it's through, Bialy relationship, small intestine move or cardiac. That's why I'm saying I learned it first as cardiac. And then autoimmune, some autoimmune are very clearly related. Because autoimmune is a fire kind of situation, autoimmune and cardiac, some autoimmune disorders and cardiac situations are related. People who've had rheumatic fevers are a little bit more susceptible to autoimmune.
Do you give any significance to molds?
To what?
Molds.
Molds?
Yeah.
I can't say, not in a systemic way. Like if somebody had a mole, I might look at it and stuff, but I can't say,
like a
this
mole
mole.
on REM4, very clearly, like somebody has.
I've never seen one.
Yeah, I saw it.
I've seen birthmarks, but not a mole. I mean, a mole is a raised thing, right?
Not raised, it's flat, but it's quite dark and relatively big.
How's that different than a birthmark?
All these are moles, these little,
look
they're
at
like
the
big
mole.
freckles.
Maybe it is, but I don't know what the birthmark. I mean, it's just like the mole. This is the mole, but it's small.
Okay. Then I'll say I don't pay any
I mean, in
attention.
macrobiotics, they give it attention to it. No.
I don't.
I'm just thinking maybe some kind of stagnation, sign of some.
I don't have one, and
Okay.
and I don't have significance. If people have lots of it, then you start thinking, something might be weird. But just because somebody has a mole on REN4, I can't, which is pigmentation change. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't go very far with that.
Okay.
Unless I saw a whole bunch of people with certain, I haven't seen enough of it to be able to say, yes, that means something. Yes?
I have two questions. Go back to is REN4 the yang of fire point that you're talking about?
Yes, yang of fire, small intestine move, right?
Okay.
Small intestine is the yang part of fire.
Okay. And then, I think I remember seeing you needle downward?
No, I needle
upwards.
slightly upwards. Red channel moves upwards. Slightly upwards. It's almost 90 degrees, slightly upwards. You can do just 90 degrees, it's okay also.
Okay. So my other question,
Yes.
follow what she was asking. I've seen quite a few people with, flesh that's kind of growing out, kind of dangling around the belly, around the waist. It's like a piece of flesh that
I think I know what you mean.
Flaps.
Skin
tag.
tag. Oh, skin tag. What do you think of that?
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. I mean, it can be I mean, is it like they lost a lot of weight and
No, they just like, they usually they're quite big people, but then it's just like little, it's almost like you want to pick it and then, it's like dangling, with a tiny piece of
Oh, okay.
flesh.
well, you get that at feet more commonly, so I think, no?
You get them more where skin rubs each other. It's
Yeah,
like
that's-
it folds.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is when
Or
there's
here.
rubbing, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, because with feet, there's
Yeah.
constant friction,
A
so.
big tummy would be the same, wouldn't it?
Sorry?
A big belly would be the same.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't have much clarity around that.
Okay, it's okay.
Don't have much to contribute.
It's okay.
So I'll look for someone.
Yeah.
So just with the not needling REN 4 with the slow pulse, your definition of slow is less than-
Okay. The definition of slow officially is 60 and below, but start thinking about it, at 66 and below, but I don't count. I don't do X speeds per 15 seconds and multiply by 4. I do it by how it feels. There are pulses that will feel slow even though when you count it, there are not. There are pulses that will feel rapid even though when you count it. So I go by how it feels. Is that correct officially? I don't know. But that's what I do. I have never bothered, at some point I bothered counting. It's not so important. So go by what you feel.
Does it have any significance that in autoimmune conditions when the pulse is hardly detectable, it's virtually impossible to feel it?
Is it significant? It's always going to be significant, the fact that the
Yeah.
pulse is like that, but it's hard to know. In terms of the autoimmune, not necessarily. I mean, supposedly so the use of REN4 is meant, REN4 resonates best when the pulse is so-called flooding.
Yeah.
What does flooding mean? It means it's a relative term.
Right.
In other words, you're feeling it more at the top level. It doesn't mean that it has to be big and strong and blah, blah, blah. But you touch and you feel, but when you go deeper, it doesn't necessarily,
Right.
have that.
Floating.
Yeah. Hmm?
Floating pulse, we call it. That's when you feel it at the top and
No, it's a little different than
It's a little
floating.
different.
No, because a flooding also has a quality of it's wider. A floating can be
Okay.
very thin.
Yeah, that's right.
And you feel it at the top. A flooding also has a width
Right,
at the
okay,
top
yep.
that you don't have.
Yeah. Thank you.
Diane?
Just asking about the pulse there, have you come across a situation where a patient's got pulse one side and then absolutely nothing on the other side?
Sure.
What do you do? in
Well,
that?
there could.
What
Well, I
do you-
only feel the pulse on one side anyway.
Sometimes you have a deviation.
Yeah.
If the artery is quite common.
Or they have a
You
blockage
actually-
at the top or
Yeah.
something. So you just but since I personally I'm not that interested in taking 12 pulses. I'm just looking for a general quality of life. You see, I just take it on the left side, and I almost never take the pulse on the right side. And I also only take pulses lying down. I used to take them sitting up. Okay, they are different pulses. They mean different things, and the pulse will change between sitting and lying.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really only interested because I'm treating them with lying down. I'm interested when I used to do more like, there's ways, for example, to look for what kind of traumas you've had at different ages. That you have to do sitting up, I believe. Stuff like that. So I used to do a lot more sitting up pulses because I used to do other things with a pulse. But since I don't do that anymore, I only do it lying down. But yeah, and I only do one side because I'm just interested in the general quality. I'm not one of those people who goes, oh yeah, your liver pulse has a blah blah, and your spleen pulse has a blah blah. Well, now I have to do two different sides in order to determine that. I'm just determining the overall state of whatever it tells me, if it tells me anything.
And with respect to gender, you know, right and left, you don't make a distinction, so left chi, right blood for everybody.
Left is chi and right is blood for absolutely everybody. Why? Okay, yeah, sorry, I knew that would come. All right. Because I know that's totally contradictory to what you often learn, that right side is yang and left side is yin. So how come the right side is blood? Okay, so think about it this way. Yang is what? Yang moves from where to where?
So right is
Sorry, from top to bottom. That yang moves from top to bottom. Yang channels move from heaven. Yang comes from heaven. It moves towards the earth. Now you're not going to like this part. Yin moves from where to where? From bottom to top. Now there's a part of you that's going to go, oh no. But that is true. The yin channels move from the feet upwards. Now, the problem that you're that you're facing with just that phrase, and this is the thing, because yin yang are always intermixed. You can say anything you want about it. People will say if something is rising, it's yang. If something is descending, it's yin. But somebody's gonna make a decision, and somebody made the decision that the yang channels are coming down and the yin channels are going up, and we're gonna abide by that decision, because otherwise you have to invent all the meridians from scratch, and we're not gonna do that. Okay, so whether that makes sense to you, you can see that it makes sense. You can see that there's a reasoning for it. You may see another point of view. Okay, that's because yin yang are always coming in contact with each other. Okay, in the body, besides the meridian, now let's look at the physical body, not the meridian body sort of thing. Find me a place where something goes up and something goes down and has two different sides, so I can decide whether the right is yang or the left is yin. The colon, right? So it ascends on the right, which makes the right side yin, and it descends on the left, which now makes the left side yang, which is kind of not what, you know, the thing, right side is yang comes, I mean, let's look at why do people say this? Okay, because most people are right-handed. So but I mean, since clear, that can't. Therefore, does that mean that people who are left-handed are going to be the opposite in which case? So I think that concept, the assumption that right is yang or chi, didn't come from looking at what the body is. It came from a cultural mentality. Like yes, most people are right. I don't even know if most people are right-handed. I don't know if that's totally true. But, but that takes away all the left-handed people, as far as I can tell.
It's not related, the right yin because of the blood in the liver.
Well, you can say there's blood in the spleen. The spleen is a lymph organ. It contains blood too. But you could do that if you wanted. I mean, I'm just giving you my explanation. All I can tell you is that, so therefore we say chi side is left side, blood side is right side. And that theory seems to hold for us. Okay, so for example, women will tend to have a lot more right-sided situations. For example, thyroid is more common to see on just right-sided, not left-sided. It's just a normal thing that we see. So it's the theory seen that way of looking at the body, chi side, blood side, does seem to have a clinical significance.
So when is the theory based on? Where is the theory of the Latin testing? Where is it coming from? You said it's
what do you mean the theory?
Explanation is based
it's
on
not a theory, it's a reality. I mean, the ascending colon, the movement in the colon ascends on the right side. It's not a theory,
yes,
it's a fact.
You cannot base the yin and the yang sides of the organ on just one organ. And
if you find me, wait. Oh, you can do anything you want. No, I'm serious. Yeah, she can come in. You can do anything you want with these things. The question is it going to serve you or not? Okay, so if you can find me another place in the body that has an up and down on two sides, and therefore relate it to, you know, that's totally fine. And then we can say, oh, well, but according to Michael's model, you
Where is the
know,
vascular system, for example?
yes, and the aorta descends, and it's more on the left side. I mean, it's the aorta. Yeah, it does tend to be more. It is slightly more on the left side.
Can I just?
I mean, I'm sure there's a way to find something, but all I'm saying is that, okay, let's put it this way. We're not looking for a perfect model that's just going to satiate we're looking for a model that's going to make sense for our clinical experience. Okay, it's I'm not starting from theory and trying to impose the theory to create a clinical experience. I'm doing the other way around. I have a clinical experience, and now I'm creating a theory to explain why my clinical experience works. Why am I creating the theory? Because I don't have to, but I'm creating the theory in order to be able to now expand my clinical experience. I have a little bit of experience. I make up a theory. Hopefully the theory has some validity to it. With that theory, I'm now expanding my capacity to create clinical experience. If I'm actually expanding my clinical experience with that theory, I'm going to keep using that theory more and more. Okay? And then I'm going to kind of dogmatize myself into this is the theory that works for me. Until one day somebody's going to say, oh, that's crap, let me show you a different theory, but they have to also show me that it's going to work clinically. And then I may actually be in a situation where I'm working with two different theories, according to the circumstance. Or I may have to, every patient sort of go, this might be quantum theory, this might be Newtonian physics, which is exactly what people do in physics. You cannot apply quantum theory when you're talking about building an airplane. You have to work with Newtonian physics. So it's the same thing. We have to choose the part that we need to or want to work with. Does that make sense? So I'm not saying it's the only theory. I'm just saying it's a theory that seems to work. Yes.
Just a real quick one. If you're using kidney 6, 7, 9, 10 on the back tray, on the front tray and out.
If I'm using what?
What is the back equivalent, the bladder equivalent of the channel? You use the water and metal of kidney.
I use kidney 7 and 10. The
Yes,
equivalent on the back, okay, the equivalent for the back is not equivalent of metal and water of
No.
kidney, it's equivalent for the kidney, which is either UB23 or UB52.
23, 52.
Yeah. And the equivalent of the lungs is 13 and 42. Yeah.
So if the back
Yeah.
treatment is like for people with slow pulse?
No, the back treatment you can use for both, in my opinion. Although, yes, originally Nagano said on the front treatment is for rapid pulse, and the back treatment is for slow pulse. And regular pulse you can treat as either, actually. What I'm saying, the way I look at it is, I do both the front and the back treatments on both types of pulses. The only difference is I do not use Ren 4 with a slow pulse. I use Mushu instead.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay, that's the way I apply it.
Yeah.
Okay, so do both the front and the back for autoimmune, just like anybody else. We're using front and back treatments. Just avoid Ren 4. So still do kidney and lung for the slow pulse. Do Mushu instead of Ren 4. And on the back, you do everybody, rapid pulse or slow pulse or regular pulse or no pulse or, UB27, UB52 or 23, UB42 or 13.
You use front and back and the same treatment?
I always do. Didn't you see? Everybody got front and back.
For this?
For autoimmune also.
Okay, thank you.
So you always pretty much do the front and back treatment?
So I always do front and back treatments. Lawrence and then
I would
Diane.
just ask, the other way you said was like, you've often said there's a thing is, left, think cardiac, think sugar,
Yes.
right, think liver. In a
Yeah.
way, that's almost more clinical than starting to think of chi and
Yes. I
from a
agree with you,
clinical
except,
point of
well,
view.
okay, no. Okay, so here's the clinical point of view for the chi and blood, okay?
good.
I always try and needle on the left first, and then on the right. You don't start needling on the right. And it's especially gonna become worth looking at is with stomach chi. So for example, because stomach chi relates very strongly to this concept, okay? So we always do stomach chi line on the left first, and only then on the right. So there's a sort of strengthening that has to happen first. And then the other, and so for example, if you have knee pain on the right side and you wanted to do stomach chi, really did a good job for the knee, I would probably throw in a stomach chi on the left, you know, and then do the stomach chi on the right. The other place where it's going to apply is on the pericardium. People with emotional issues, it's almost like figuring out, is the issue more how substantiated the emotional issue is, because as long as it's in the chi side, it's one thing. But once it becomes, once pericardium worked, pericardium on the left doesn't do anything. Pericardium on the right only does it. It kind of tells you that the emotional issue, it's now a blood issue, meaning it's got more substance. So you can make a bunch of stuff out of it if you want. But yeah, generally speaking, I agree with you that from a diagnostic perspective, left side heart, right side liver is much more applicable dogma, much more easily applicable dogma, clinically speaking, yes. So the chi and blood side, I'm really looking in terms of the order of needling.
The pericardium you needle on the right first.
No, always chi first. Hi. Oh, hello. Always chi first, blood second. The chi moves the blood. I just said that if you did something, for example, if there's an emotional issue and the pericardium on the left doesn't do anything, but the pericardium on the right does, your thinking, my thinking is, okay, this issue is now more blood involved, okay? And therefore, because it's emotional, if it's blood involved, it means it has more physical substance, because the blood is the physical substance of the emotions. Diane, you had a question?
How would you choose between bladder 13 and bladder 42 and 20?
And 42 and 13 or 52 and 23, yeah. Yes. One has to be able to rattle numbers. That's all I do. Whatever resolves something. My preference generally is for the outer UB line, and like you saw yesterday, 52 I needle towards the spine, 42 on the other hand I needle towards the scapula. Now, if you have findings, see which one releases. If not, you just got, maybe which one has more gumminess. If not, just by your own, I don't like the outer UB line. It's like whatever you're going to come up with.
And the other thing is, right from the beginning, you've got the story that this is autoimmune. You're obviously checking this stuff against your findings, or you would just, if somebody's got a diagnosis, then would you use this treatment anyway?
If somebody has a diagnosis of autoimmune, I'm going to trust the blood test that they are. And I mean, God for it can happen that the blood got mixed or something. It's not them. But yeah, so that's actually a very important point. Somebody has autoimmune, somebody has diabetes, somebody has thyroid. I'm trying to think if there's another one of those. Right now, we'll assume those are it. That categorized them. That became the primary thing to treat. Now they can have all three, by the way. Okay, so it's poor person. I have I have autoimmune blah blah blah, and I have diabetes, and I have they can have autoimmune thyroid. Now notice that all of these are going to be treated via kidney. Okay, so they're not all that different in a sense. Okay. And you can also claim that diabetes is an autoimmune disorder. But when somebody comes in, sorry?
I thought diabetes was spleen 3.
Spleen 3 plus adrenal and immune and OD. and then T11, T12. So yes, spleen 3, but it still has adrenal, so it still has it has something already in common with you know, treatments wise. But the thing is that you, if they have diabetes or they have autoimmune or they have thyroid, because all of these, you know, these are they're either metabolic diseases in the case of diabetes and thyroid, so they're going to affect every cell in your body. Okay? Or in this case of autoimmune, it's going to affect your whole body. You cannot ignore the fact that that's what they have. Chances are somebody who says, I'm diabetic, or even lots of diabetes in the family, say they come for back pain, okay? I still do spleen 3, adrenal, immune, possibly even OD, and see if the back pain is better. Okay, I'm treating.
But if you know there is a possibility of autoimmune, but you don't have a diagnosis, how would you?
I don't know what you mean by possibility of autoimmune.
Well, let's say somebody in the family has a let's say potentially stronger propensity.
Then you can try and see if autoimmune protocol, that does not automatically put that person in the autoimmune category, but you can try autoimmune treatment and check how much good does Ren4 do for you? How much good does, you know, the protocol going to do for you? I'm not just going to stick the needles, but yes, it's something I'm going to think about because there's a propensity towards it. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes, and you would check these mastery possibly and
yes,
lower back, and then
yeah,
based on that you would maybe try.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Just
last
quickly,
question.
Go back to the outer inner bladder points.
Outer inner.
Which ones are going towards spine? Which one's going? Is that the?
Neither one. Okay. UB52, I needle towards the spine. UB42, I needle towards the scapula. Fair? All right.
Sorry, what about the inner one? The inner?
Needle downwards.
Okay.
I needle bladder line inwards. I mean downwards.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. How's your cystitis?
I'm afraid it's got quite nasty again.
Oh.
Yeah, it got bad again yesterday evening. So,
You still have your magnets on?
yes, yeah.
Okay. And it's still, so it was nasty in the evening and